that trust is, spoken about, that's being discussed, that its ability to transform, ruin, and create a whole new business product. What do you have to say? Like, what are some of the key lessons learned?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the point that you made is a really important one, and I think that's an important takeaway that I've learned, which is these organizations are very data-driven, and they try largely to remain fairly transparent internally. But the functions think about data in very different ways, which is, it doesn't need to be so, right? So when, everyone's not looking necessarily at the same metrics, and they don't have to be looking at the same metrics because they'll be overwhelmed, and it makes sense to have people be incentivized on subsets of those metrics. But there's some obvious cases in which there's misalignment. Like, some of these companies, when there's some type of PR tactic that takes place, very rarely that is in conjunction with some information and some actual data-driven measurement that has been taking place by a product or a research team, and vice versa. Like, many of the tactics that look good on paper from a kind of a quantitative standpoint might not necessarily pass the sniff test once you go kind of a more qualitative thing. And of course, a game of judgment, but I think more like closer cooperation and more kind of cross-information sharing there is important. It's something that's happening more, but definitely the industry is still not there, particularly in consumer tech. I think other industries are probably further behind anyways. So if anything, I think the consumer tech companies are probably still ahead of the pack. The second point on trust that is kind of interesting is, trust, of course, we started a conversation with trust is hard to define, how you measure it, how you ask people, what are the people there. Obviously, one trend, particularly in consumer technology, is can you actually, really have people think of trust the way they think of, currency, something very tangible, very malleable, exchangeable, that you can put a price on. Mm-hmm. I am not a crypto person at all. I'm a blockchain person. This is kind of, but that is the one aspect of that I'm actually excited about, which is in many ways you can use this new technology of the blockchain to decentralize the concept of trust and actually give it shape, give it form. That's not done yet. Right now, if anything, trust will be the last thing I'll use to refer to as kind of like the cryptocurrencies. But the premise, there's a kernel in there of fundamentally what you're trying to modularize and turn into something that's a unit that can be exchanged, that can be owned, is trust by itself. I think that's a very powerful concept. I haven't kind of wrapped around my head what that's going to look like, how that's going to transform this conversation. But if you start from kind of the basic steps where, in the current world, you trust your bank. You trust that when you go check your balance, it's going to be the same thing it was before unless you make a transaction. You're fundamentally trusting your bank to do that, right? And you're trusting a number of other parties. You trust that, if you pay the electricity bill, the electricity will come. And then you trust that the internet will come as well if you pay for that, but sometimes it's out of service and such. I think in a world where those transactions are not relying on the trust for the brand itself, but like, as a matter of fact, you have this token, that transaction has happened without people needing to get involved, that will transform these conversations. For example, in data privacy, right? I don't have to trust Facebook about what they tell me about my data if I know exactly where my data is, what's being used for. I don't have to trust, so-and-so to not be doing something that's against what I'm thinking through because there's something that actually is tracking, monitoring in a kind of ongoing basis. That I think could transform the arena. I think that's long ahead. But it's something that particularly since you're looking at consumer tech, these guys are thinking about, and I think a lot of folks in the Valley are thinking about as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's a really interesting point. I think that I agree. Trust is as important in so much as you make it important, and finding these ways to kind of create more form and function and kind of create more structure from it for purpose of exchange. I like the idea of crypto trust. That's pretty cool. Well, cool. That's about an hour. Really, really super helpful insights. I really appreciate you being so in-depth and definitely can use this.
Happy to help.
Great. Okay, cool. Thanks, man.
Terrific. Take care.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers.
Bye-bye.